Anne of Green Gables, she got revenge when Gilbert kept calling her carrots. She smashed that writing board, that blackboard, that thing over his head.
Slate.
Slate, thank you.
Guess we know who's the more hardcore fan.
You win.
Okay.
But who referenced it in this section? Welcome to Attached, a podcast about the loved ones we're attached to and the good, the bad, and the ugly advice about those relationships that maybe we shouldn't be so attached to. We here at Attached want to share ways to enhance your relationships and debunk all that bad relationship advice using science. I'm Dr. Patricia Robertson out of the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, Tennessee.
I'm Dr. Sarah Woods at UT Southwestern Medical Center.
And I'm Dr. Sesson Nagash in San Diego State University.
Today, Sesson is going to bring us a conversation about the House of Dragons and, drumroll please, revenge. Then, in our academic deep dive segment, we're going to discuss an academic article, First-Time Fathers Show Longitudinal Gray Matter Cortical Volume Reductions. Rolls right off my tongue. Evidence from 2 international samples. And then in good or bad advice, we'll talk about some social media tweets and Instagram posts that some of our listeners sent in. If you have advice, speaking of, that you'd like us to talk about, send it to us. You can email us at attachedpodcast@gmail.com, tweet us, Facebook us, Instagram us, all at Attached Podcast, or go to attachedpodcast.com and send us a message. Also, wherever you listen to our podcast, YouTube, Apple, Spotify, please consider rating and reviewing. It really helps us out, get the message out. And also, if you would love to, go to our Patreon page and consider becoming a member. Great show lined up today. But before we get to all of that goodness, how are you guys doing? Talk to me. What's new? What's old? What's hip? No, not what's hip.
Yeah, not if we're asking me to report specifically. It's not going to happen. I will share, I am currently first in my fantasy football league. Yeah.
Yay!
Or rather was until about 1 week ago.
Oh.
I know when I lost to the last place team. I know.
Which was? The last place team is?
The last place team was my brother's fiance. She'd come out strong at the start of the season, then had a few really rough games, and then I lost to her. And I should have seen that coming.
Sorry, I think I misunderstood. I thought a team was like an actual NFL team. I have no idea how this works.
Oh, no.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fantasy. It's all invented. It's fake football. Fantasy. I'm the coach of a fake football team. Yeah, imaginary. And there's no money riding on this. We don't pay into it. It's surely for bragging rights. The problem is I used those bragging rights liberally for several weeks and claimed it was just a game of statistics. So obviously I am crushing everybody. And then no longer lost my crown and I'm no longer in first place. And so we're just going to focus on the first portion of the season.
Yeah.
Well, it's not even half. I made it. I'm not even sure. I think I made it 4 weeks.
But there's still like time, right? Like you can recover, right?
Sure. Well, yeah, I was really looking for that clean record, though. No. I was so proud of myself.
Aren't we all looking for a clean record?
Yeah. I was suggesting to my parents they could even check in with my brothers about how they were doing because I had destroyed them both and not anymore. So that's how I'm doing.
Well, here is to a recovery and like a bounce back.
Thanks.
They call it recovery.
I appreciate it. I'm not actually sure. I don't know. I've never been in second place before. Just kidding. I probably was last year. Yeah.
Well, congratulations on the first 4 weeks.
Thanks.
Sesson, what's up with you? How's it going? Tell us stories.
Oh, gosh. It has been busy several weeks. You know, I feel like I haven't had a lot of eventful stuff happen, but I guess I could speak to my efforts to try to be a gardener. Yeah, it's not going so well.
I love gardening efforts here.
I really thought when I purchased my first home, I would be all about the garden and constantly in the backyard and front yard, just, tilling, doing the things that people do.
Yeah.
Is that what they call it? I don't know.
It is
I
one
tried
thing
to
that
pick up
happens in
some garden
gardens.
lingo and see if that would carry me through, but it's not working. And the little I know is I have all the equipment and even the apron for it, but I still don't have.
You bought the
What apron?
outfit.
Oh, right.
It's always where I start. I always start with an outfit and hoping it inspires me, right?
love
But
it.
it tends to be something that just ends up on OfferUp after a few weeks. So this outfit I'm keeping because I'm
Perfectly clean, by the way. It's
Right.
still perfectly clean when she gives it away. From all the tilling.
From all the tilling I'm doing. I have gotten a little better, but I share in the responsibility with my husband, who's much better at, being patient with like
Plants.
things growing and, and I'm just like, it didn't grow, it must be dead, let's replace it. And he's like, okay, like that's not how it works. Just give it some time. And I think I don't have the patience for gardening. I really think that's what it comes down to. I don't mind getting in the dirt. I don't mind finding a worm here or there, but I don't have the patience for the slow growth, right? And so I
That's
don't know.
why I
We'll
got
see.
out of therapy. I mean, being a therapist, didn't have the patience for it.
It's amazing
slow
where I
growth.
can, the slow growth. It's amazing where I can be fine with incremental growth, or with the places I can't seem to stand it. But I think when there is physical like labor involved, I just want to see something
Immediate.
But I think I'm getting there. I think I'm getting a little more patient. And I'm definitely mindful of the seasons and how that contributes. Given that I live in San Diego, there's always sun. So I assume the sun is out, the water's
Sure.
there. Come on, what are you doing? Why aren't you
What do you
growing?
grow in San Diego?
We don't tend to grow a lot of foliage. Like we don't do a lot of plants that, require a lot of water, a lot of
Well, that
water
makes sense.
tolerant. And I think that one thing that does have foliage is our Mexican salvia. We have Mexican Russian salvia.
Oh, that makes sense.
And so those ones they're rooted do really well, but they're also really temperamental if they don't really fit in well with the soil that we have. But I used to do succulents a lot, and I was a big fan of succulents because succulents are really robust and they can handle a lot and they grow pretty fast. So I think in different conditions too. So I would say, and I don't do vegetables because I've miserably failed at that.
They'll disappoint you every time.
Every time.
Unless you're Patricia.
Unless
unless
you're
you literally
Patricia's
feed your whole
husband. I
family
don't
off
do
of
any
it.
of it.
No, I've seen you, do the work, freeze the food. You all could feed a family of 50 if you had to with the growth stuff.
When you do the work.
You have to know that the growing aspect isn't me. It's my husband who literally has a PhD in crop sciences. Like it's not like
it feels like something you could just pick up though. I agree. I agree.
I mean, people did pick it up for centuries and centuries,
right.
Millennia, some may say.
Yeah, right. But I think you have a good balance there. You love to cook. You love to take, what you grow and do something with it. If I have like something random growing out of the vegetables I grow, I'll disregard it because I don't trust it. I grew it.
Trust it?
I can't trust it.
The metaphor of what this gardening experience is like.
I don't trust it. I grew it. I don't trust it.
It's growing funny. I must
Rip
have
it
done
out.
something. Yeah. There's not a lot of self-efficacy here. It's I don't trust that I actually can do this work. Maybe that's the core of the problem.
Yeah, I think we found it. Years of therapeutic work. Nope, just couldn't be a host attached. We'll find it.
Bunch of fruitless tilling and unlocked.
Oh my gosh, so funny. We're not. Well, I guess we're planting. That should always be in quotes. We're planting winter crops right now in our garden, but the fall, beautiful crisp air here in East Tennessee. Leaves are changing colors in the Smoky Mountains. Fall, you know what that means? Anna Green Gables. So I'm so excited. Anna Green Gables season. It's on my to-do list. I haven't done it yet, but I'm anticipating it. I've seen a lot of memes and reels and TikToks of Anna Green Gables. So I think in the next week or so, really just going to dig in for a solid, is it 12 hours of Anna Green Gables and of Avonlea?
I think it's 12 hours. I was going to say 16, but I think it depends on where you stop.
Yeah. I don't do the continuing story one.
I don't either. So just 12.
Good for them for getting that cash and doing that third one. But I'm just going to stick with the duo of Anne of Green Gables and of Avonlea, and then that's all for me. But gosh, I'm excited about that. A nice bottle of wine, day drinking, 2 days in a row. I can't do it in one day. I'll do it in 2 days. No, I won't drink all day. I'll just like drink in the evening. Really get into Anne of Green Gables. That's what I'm looking forward to. Sesson, remember the first time you saw Anne of Green Gables?
Yeah, I was both so happy and so mad at you because I couldn't do my work. I was like, I have to watch this thing. I was so confused by how much I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
It was very hard to reconcile that, but I am grateful for you introducing me to it. I can't wait to introduce it to Dre. I don't think he's there yet at 6, but
I've tried it a few times with mine and quickly. I mean, within 20 minutes, I'm like, you're not appreciating it to the level I need you to. We'll try again in a few years. No, this one's for me. It's not going to be a family thing.
So good. Yeah, this is me on my laptop, just fully immersed in it. That's one of the ways Sarah and I also bonded was I was like, oh my gosh, you know Anne of Green Gables? She was like, do I know it?
oh, so you came in as like an equal maybe
Sure.
in that understanding of that character.
Yeah, but I don't think
yeah.
we figured this out until maybe a year or two ago.
Oh.
Like it was a while
Major
into
oversight.
our relationship that we were
Sort of
just
a
like
core
It's like a
personality
first
feature.
date kind of detail.
first research it. All of my future research collaborations. First 2 questions are, have you seen Anne of Green Gables and do you love it? Yes. Next question, Pride and Prejudice 2015 or the 90s,
Mhm.
2005, sorry. If they say the 90s version, we're going to have a conversation.
Out.
It's 2005 all the way.
That's right.
The Keira
100%.
Knightley version?
100%.
Yes.
No question.
All the way. 100% over the 90s version. Yes. I will fight you on this.
I have seen
Just kidding.
neither, so I can't contribute.
Okay. Well, next time I see you, Sesson, I guess I know what we're doing. Anyway, first up, Poppin Culture. We learn about relationships from our friends and family, but a lot of what we think about love and relationships come from what we see in pop culture. For this first segment, we take a moment to highlight events in pop culture that influence people's lives and how we view relationships. Sesson, what you got for us on the docket today?
So, today I'm going to talk about a little show. No, it's not little at all. It's a big show.
A little unheard show.
I was going to say, some of us have heard of it. HBO's wildly popular show, House of the Dragon. It's captured the attention, I believe, of millions of people. That's what HBO does. It creates these hit shows. And interestingly enough, I've never watched the Game of Thrones. I did start watching it the last season, which was
Just
probably
diving in there right at the end.
I did
right
the same.
at the end.
Yeah.
I really,
Yeah.
I'm not sure what I go back. I don't know. I was
Nah,
really interested,
wasn't worth
but I
it.
was like, yeah, it's probably not. Now that I have this other show to watch, of course, I don't think it is. But the show is a prequel to Game of Thrones, and it's based on George Martin's film or book series Fire and Blood, and it's set 200 years before the events in Game of Thrones, which is why you don't see any of the characters from Game of Thrones in the show. And it tells you the story of the House of Targaryen. And the central theme is really succession. It's about power and the throne, and its central characters are really focused on trying to make sure that their house sort of is in the lead or sort of in front of the throne. And it's a lot of focus on power and name recognition in terms of families. So I didn't think I would be really interested in it, but I'm really captivated by the acting and just some of the very strange storylines in some ways. Admittingly, it's not for everyone, but it's captured my attention anyhow. And it's really centered on like capturing, I think throughout the series, I haven't read the books, but it's focused on like, preparing us for this great civil war that happens within this family and how it unfolds over the years. So in a recent episode that I watched, there was a scene sort of focused on an eye for an eye kind of experience. Literally, So literally,
not metaphor.
I don't know that I want to spoil it for people, but during the
Fair
scene, it was really focused on somebody losing an eye, and then the family on the other side wanted revenge and wanted the eye of the family member for the eye of their family member. So
real Romeo and Juliet situation here.
yeah, which in and of itself, it would have been just one thing to watch that. But I had just recently also started watching this movie called The Northman.
With Alexander Skarsgård.
Yes, and Nicole Kidman and some other really up and coming actors, but it's a Viking movie, which is really very if you watch Viking, yeah, it's a lot of violence, a lot of like senseless violence. I didn't actually finish it. I couldn't do that, but the whole plot is it's a revenge plot. Okay, the whole movie. And so I'm watching this revenge movie thinking it's so much revenge. And then I'm watching this House of the Dragon and it's like an eye for an eye.
Yeah, revenge.
I'm reminded, like, gosh, I watch a lot of things that are about revenge. As a viewer, I mean, I just came to realize that a lot of our shows are centered on the idea of revenge, right? Like, especially some of the darker shows, I think that often capture our attention.
You're right. It's a really good point.
So it left me wondering, like, why does revenge sort of capture our attention? And why do we see it as a form of entertainment? I think that's a bigger question, but and also, what does the science say about how engaging in revenge impacts our actual wellness and relationships, especially? Like, I'm just curious because we watch all of this. I'm thinking somehow we're inputting messages about like what revenge does for us, how satisfying it could be or gratifying, right? Is it cathartic? Is it helpful? But I was also thinking like, gosh, I wonder what it does to relationships. Of course, on one level, like we could guess, right? Like it's not good. But I'm just curious what the science is behind it, because I really don't think I come across a lot of science research on revenge. A lot I think about, like, we have a lot of statistics on outcomes, I think, but we don't see like what are the motivators around like people's behavior. And I think revenge is sometimes one that we should be looking at. So, I mean, it's difficult, again, to calculate the number of crimes committed, for example, in revenge, right? Especially when you look at, like, we don't look a lot at criminal motivation in the research. But there was a recent article that I found by Clemente and Espinoza in 2021 article that stated this specifically. Most homicides are motivated by revenge. Revenge is an ever-present, long-lasting phenomenon that may be construed as a health problem, considering its consequences for victims and perpetrators. And it sometimes is executed years after the event that triggered it has finished, right? And sort of attached to that article was a reference to another article by Boone et al. In 2019 that says revenge is prevalent in couple relationships, and over 90% of people in a couple relationship report getting even, right? Getting even in the past with their partners.
90%?
What?
Yeah, I did not admittingly go back and look to see how they statistics on that. But I did, as a couples therapist, as someone who studies relationships, I do often see a lot of reactivity in relationships. And it's really this immediate response is like, you harmed me, I'm going to harm you, right? Which is sort of the spirit behind revenge. Is like, I have to seek some kind of justice for getting hurt or for being harmed. And so, I think given how reactive we are when we are hurt, I think I'm not surprised that a lot of people do the tit for tat, eye for an eye kind of engage in that kind of behavior. So the challenge with, I think, rectifying like an injustice is that the definition of justice can vary from person to person. But more importantly, I think just because one seeks revenge does not mean a person understands what they did wrong or is remorseful for their actions. I think that's an important consideration. And so that being said, I did find a study too by German psychologist, scientist Mario, and I apologize for butchering this name, Golziner, which suggests that people don't feel better after seeking revenge unless the avenger knows that the offender is aware of and understands the harm. that they cause. So it's not
and
just
then revenge helps them feel good. Is that what you're advising?
No, I think there's
let her get to her point.
Don't engage in revenge, and also, focus on them understanding why you sought revenge. Like, we're not promoting revenge, but people did engage in revenge, avenge, right? Something that happened in their lives or to someone that they love, they didn't feel better because they did it, right? Like, they often would say, like, unless somebody understands why they did it, it wouldn't feel good, right? And often people who feel like you did something out of revenge to them, they're not going to seek understanding anyway. So it's not the way to go.
It's unlikely to repair a relationship if it's a tit for tat.
No one,
escalation.
People don't say, you hurt, like, wow, you sought revenge on me, and now I'm going to try to understand why you did. Really, that's not how the communication works.
I don't think I've ever heard that phrase before.
House of Dragons. That's not we're not promoting how to do that. But how do you find that way? No, it's really like, you harm me, I harm you, and now I'm going to harm you back, right? It usually is, it's really cyclical in that way. So
yeah, it sounds like the amount of revenge scripted television and movies might be a reflection of the amount of it that actually exists in society, but it's not healthy.
Yes, it is not healthy.
It
is, I think, should have probably started there. I mean, I am talking about the science, so it's not.
No, it's true. No, we're here for it.
But I do think that there's something about how much we take in as consumers that we have to be mindful of, how we are making sense of what revenge does for us. Like, are we on some level looking at revenge as the way to rectify harm and hurt in our lives? Or are we aware enough to say, like, okay, that's exaggerated, that's entertainment. I know better than to think revenge is something that is actually going to be helpful to me or make me feel better or create some, especially, balance the scales at all, because it clearly does not do that. We could definitely say from a lot of different research and, our work as clinicians, that does not help one feel better about something that has happened to them, let alone repair relationships.
So what is your recommendation if you feel like you want to do revenge? What is a better way than
or if you're looking to get to the throne specifically?
What's your yeah, you can talk to Charles about this. I'm just kidding.
We have real life
Queen Elizabeth died of natural causes, you guys.
Of old age. Yeah. I know that was a diagnosis, but yes. So I think, honestly, when I was looking at this, I was more thinking, like, gosh, I hope we're not sensitized to believe, like, or to think like this is the way you respond to being harmed or hurt. Like yesterday's scene, I think they clearly sort of clarified, right, within the episode too, like that was probably not the way to go about seeking revenge.
Not taking someone's eye.
Yeah, right. Like they weren't promoting that clearly.
Yeah.
But I was watching that Northman movie, and then I think about all the other movies that are really based on the revenge plot, and thinking, like, we sure really do think, like, in our society, like that's what we see. And
well, if we also think about Anna Green Gables, she got revenge when Gilbert kept calling her carrots. She smashed that writing board, that blackboard, that thing over his head. Slate, thank you.
Guess we know who's the more hardcore fan.
You win, but who referenced it in this section?
At least one Anna Green Gables reference every episode this season. That's
done.
That's
goal set and accepted.
So I don't know if I have any questions for you this week about it, to be honest. I just wanted to share, like, my reaction to, like, having sort of just been saturated by revenge plots. I was like, oh my goodness, like, what's going on? Why am I entertained by this? And what does it mean? Like, as somebody who knows better than to think revenge is the way to go, why am I finding entertainment in that?
But I think that's also a take-home message for a lot of the entertainment that we do consume, that it's okay to be entertained by it. Just know that it's probably not always the healthiest way to execute your own relationships. Execute is the wrong term there, but you know what I mean. Because I mean, I'm a sucker, and we've talked about this on the podcast so many times. I'm a sucker for rom-coms and cheesy rom-coms. I love it so much. They're cheesy and fantastic, But I also know it's not the best relationship setup. People do not frequently, it's not a good expectation that you're going to fall in love in 6 days and then have one fight and then end up happily ever after 6 days. It's just not healthy expectations for relationships, but I still enjoy the heck out of it. So I think that that's also a similar message here. It's okay to enjoy revenge. Just know maybe it's not the best way to enact your relationships. Now we're going to move to our academic deep dive segment and discuss a new research article on first-time dads, and specifically how the brain of these fathers might change during the transition to parenthood. And a new Cerebral Cortext article titled "First-Time Fathers Show Longitudinal Gray Matter Cortical Volume Reductions, Evidence from 2 International Samples." Authors from Madrid and Barcelona, including Doctors Magdalena Martinez Garcia, Maria Panternilla Dia, Sofia Cardenas, Oscar Villarroya, Manuel Desco, Susanna Carmona, and Dr. Darby Saxby at USC, collaborated to explore how the parenting experience may affect neuroplasticity. Our brains adapt to our context and are shaped by our life experiences, stress, culture, and learning new skills. Becoming a new parent is an enormous new experience. And although dads have become increasingly involved in parenting over the last 50 years, neurobiological research on brain changes associated with transitioning to parenthood have focused almost exclusively on moms. Structural magnetic resonance imaging, or as we all probably know it, MRI studies have found structural changes in new moms' brains across 2 neural areas that are related to parenting behavior. Subcortical structures, including the hippocampus and amygdala, for example, which promote being vigilant to infant crying, and are tied to mom's motivation to attach to their infants. Changes are also seen in cortical areas involved in understanding social relationships and responding to infants' needs appropriately. However, focusing on imaging moms' brains limits our ability to understand what changes in the brain may be related directly to pregnancy versus changes that are associated with the experience of becoming a first-time parent. It also limits our ability to adequately support moms and dads as they experience this transition. So, without being too cheesy, I gotta say my gray matter is dying to learn what these authors found. Sarah, to you.
So I was super excited about the study. I think I messaged you a few weeks ago, Patricia, when I saw this sort of first
we're all such
that
nerds.
I was like, I know, but it's such cool research. And it is very directly tied to what we like to talk about on Attached in terms of how relationships shape our lives and how we shape our relationships, right? So these researchers work together to specifically look at these neuroanatomic changes that occur in the brain for first-time dads in the transition to becoming fathers. And what they predicted was that dads would show changes in the brain that affect the cortex more so than the subcortex. So that subcortex is that area that, Patricia, you just described as tied to more limbic areas in the brain that are below the cortex. They're more basic brain structures related to sort of older parenting behaviors that we observe in mammals. The authors predicted that those areas are potentially more likely to change in moms because they're impacted by pregnancy hormones and biologically embedded, which may be more relevant for biological moms than for dads, versus changes in the cortex, which is a sort of latest evolving structure of the brain, the part of the brain that is involved in attention and planning and executive functioning, and the cortical networks that are more closely related to learned social and cultural parenting processes. So they especially were interested in this part of the cortex known as the default mode network, which is involved in mentalizing, or this ability that we have as humans to reflect on and make sense of our own mental states, what we're thinking and feeling, but also our ability to reflect on and recognize what other people are thinking and feeling and how those mental states are tied to our behavior. So it's the structures involved in empathy and emotion regulation and being able to sort of understand what another person needs and respond to that. So they predicted that for dads who are engaged in parenting but not the pregnancy process directly, this may be more likely to be where we see changes in the brain when we become fathers. So they prospectively imaged cohabiting first-time right-handed fathers' brains before and after the transition to fatherhood. So in the lab that was based in Spain, they collected MRI images from 20 dads before partners' pregnancies, and then again 2 to 3 months postpartum. They also had a control group of 17 childless men who over the course of the study didn't have children, were not intending to have children, etc. In the California-based lab, they also scanned 20 dads starting in mid to late pregnancy and then again 7 to 8 months postpartum. So there's some overlap in the time period of where these two labs imaged dads, and also they did this across the transition to becoming fathers for the first time. So what they were looking at were changes in volumes of the brain related to the cortex and subcortex. So they looked at, so when you've seen like a picture of a brain, right, there's all sort of those like bumps and grooves and wrinkles, right? Sure. Yeah. So they're looking at the volume of those bumps and grooves on the surface of the brain. That's the cortex. They also looked at the volume of gray matter that was specific to the subcortex regions that they were really interested in. They also looked at the change and thickness of the cortex, the surface area, and specific functional networks that were affected by changes in the cortex. So the visual network, limbic network, which would be tied to emotion, etc. So what they found, as predicted, were that first-time fathers displayed reductions in the volume of their cortex, which was especially a decrease in cortical thickness for dads who were in the Spanish study and decrease in cortex surface area for dads studied in California, and volume reductions in the default mode network that they were especially interested in that mentalizing process. So when we're using parts of our brain to think and reflect on people's other emotions and others' thought processes, we see reductions in the brain volume.
Oh, so reductions is a good thing.
It is a good thing.
Okay.
They are
because reductions inherently we think, oh, that's not good. But I know. In brain functioning or this measurement of brain, it's good.
Yes. So they some of the headlines talked about like shrinkage, like brain shrinkage. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure I don't think that's necessarily how these authors talked about this, but they did find like significant volume reductions in the visual network, and also for Spanish dads, but only Spanish dads, the dorsal attention network, which is a part of the brain that is related to goal-directed attention. They did not find changes in the cortex of childless men. And these changes weren't associated with age. And then also, as predicted, subcortical volume did not change within the groups. That older sort of set of brain structures that we do see change in the brains of new moms were not observed to change for these new dads. And so what these authors are talking about, much like you just described, Patricia, is that these brain circuits are positively adapting to parenthood and the caregiver role. So these changes support dads being able to understand their child's needs and emotions and respond with care and empathy and adapt to the mental and emotional demands of parenting. We have all been first-time moms, and it is an intense experience. And the changes in the visual network, they were sort of surprised by. They wondered if that may relate to some other research findings that suggest that dads may have better performance in visual memory tasks, that it may relate to dads' abilities to recognize their infants, respond accordingly, which may make sense, especially if babies are not speaking. We're needing to use our visual attention, our visual processing more.
You know, my husband is really good at finding things when they get lost.
Oh, that's so sweet. I don't know if that's a memory thing or a visual thing.
Oh, I assumed it was a visual thing, but you're right. It could be a memory thing.
It could be either. It could be both. Let's give him credit. It's both. It's the first time he had a baby, he was all of a sudden like,
I can find
zoomed in.
things
And that positive adaptation to parenthood and the caregiver role, that those brain volume reductions are really reflective of our brains refining, right? And specializing, becoming more efficient. We see this at other periods of life. The authors point to adolescence, where we see our brains sort of start to remove redundancies that we don't need as we develop and grow. And that this becoming more efficient and refining these parts of the brain that are really potentially very specifically tied to parenting tasks, this new skill set that we're learning is may help dads to be more sensitive to babies' needs, which I just love this framing of one way of how our relationships remodel and shape us. And in this study, literally changed the shapes of our brains. We could see how dads were adapting to this over time through these MRI images. It is a small sample. To be fair, I think it's on the larger size for MRI studies.
Yeah, I was thinking that too.
And I can't imagine the resources it takes actually to do these kind of imaging research. And they found that the volume reductions were different from zero, but not significantly different from childless men. So there is potentially something to be said about their having more time. My understanding is these researchers continue to do this work, and with more brains, more images to be looking at, they'll have more ability to detect these changes. But I think it's really very interesting. I think capturing parenting quality and how engaged dads are, to look at whether that's tied to variation in changes in the brain, not just sort of the fact that they did transition to parenthood, because they didn't capture the parent-child relationship quality as part of the study. But they did sort of suggest that potentially they may have seen some unique changes in the Spanish sample that may, for example, be tied to more generous paternity leave policies in Spain.
Oh, interesting.
Right? I mean, what a brilliant hypothesis.
But also it totally makes sense. If you're allowed to
Yes.
spend more time with your infant,
you're going to see more
change.
It absolutely makes sense. So overall, I mean, what I think is very interesting is that these changes are smaller. They're less distinct than brain changes, volume reductions we would see in biological moms' brains over the course of transitioning to motherhood. But that is potentially tied to these pregnancy hormones, and also less variation in what we expect from moms in terms of caregiving.
Right.
But becoming a parent, it's just a huge, enormous change and a really big opportunity for growth. And understanding dad brain could really help us understand kids and how to support families better.
Yeah, how to support families better. I really like that a whole lot. I always appreciate and love research that demonstrates how our brains can change in adulthood. Like that, we're not
plastic.
Yeah, the plasticity of it is just always so remarkable and just gives me so
cool.
much hope. And like, I know that that's not what these authors were trying to do, but this type of research just gives me hope that like even in adulthood we can change, and on a very basic level, including our brain. So that's so cool.
I mean, I think it is what they were trying to do, right? I mean, I think they're looking at the adaptation process in families and what this looks like at a neural level. I'm obsessed with this work. I think it's very, very cool.
It's interesting to put out there in terms of thinking about how dads, or maybe soon to be dads, or thinking about being a dad, like how men in particular sometimes don't know that they're up for the challenge, right? Or up for the task. And so it's like, there's that hesitancy. Can I do this? Can I actually step in? And I think for some, it's actually a reason why they don't, right? Like they don't have that sense of confidence, that self-efficacy that they could do the job. And so they're not actually investing that time and effort. To see this says, you know what, like there's science to show that when you put that time and effort, your brain will adapt, your brain will change. And I think it gives people maybe some hope to think like, okay, I just need to sort of actually engage in the parenting act, right? And my brain will support me in that.
And validates you're learning something new. This is a new skill set.
Yeah.
Parenting is not just inherent. It's not just innate.
Yes.
And it's such important work that your brain reshapes itself to accommodate learning that new skill. It's so valuable. I totally agree.
Yeah, I support that. Really cool.
Woohoo! Boo!
Woohoo! Yeah. Finally, time for good or bad advice, where we talk about pervasive relationship advice in our culture. We hear relationship advice from our parents, family, and friends. We see advice about how to be or not to be in relationships from movies and TV shows. And we read endless advice spewed at us on all the social medias, blogs, numerous top 10 lists. The World Wide Web is full of it. But a lot of it just actually isn't good for our relationships, believe it or not. This is the part of the show where we use science, mind you, to decide if the advice is good or bad. If you have seen or heard some advice that you'd like us to talk about, please send it to us. Email us at attachedpodcast@gmail.com or get at us on the Twitters, the Instagrams, the Facebooks, all of those things at Attached Podcast, or go to attachedpodcast.com and send us a message. While you're at it, as always, please kindly rate and review the podcast and subscribe as well if you want to. That'd be cool. Also, we always have a bonus good or bad advice for our Patreon subscribers. If you want that bonus content, please kindly become a member at patreon.com/attached. So today we're going to venture into social media and talk about some advice from Twitter and Instagram that was sent to us. This first one is from @IamTabithaBrown. Are you guys ready? Okay, good. Being blood related doesn't make you family. Actions, respect, and love for each other make you family. All right, what are we thinking? Good or bad advice? Woods?
Yeah, I think that is good advice. I think being blood related is one very basic way to define family. Mm-hmm. And it's not even a necessary way to define family, but it's certainly not sufficient. I think that a really important way we define family are cultures and customs and connections, and we can be blood related to people and be considered maybe legally family and not choose to find these people as people we want to stay connected to necessarily in adulthood. But it's much more than being related by blood. There are lots of people who are family and that people consider to be family without any blood relationship whatsoever. I think that's good advice.
Good advice from Woods. Sesson, what are you thinking? Good or bad advice?
Well, I think it's good advice in the way that Sarah's describing the one side of it, where we expand our definition of family to include people who we care for and care for us, right? So we don't, and I think that is exactly how I experienced it as well. Also, I wonder, however, that other part of that statement, being family, is about, I think you said respect. I can't remember.
Love for each other.
Respect and love for each other make you family. Actions, respect, and love. Yeah. So I think the love part makes sense, but I do think there are a lot of people out there who would, if under that definition, probably say there are a lot of people who are blood related that they don't consider family, because not everyone extends each other respect, or nor do they always feel like they're putting love out there into the relationship, but they are still family. And I think the reasons they don't do it as frequently, express love or respect, might vary. And sometimes it's cultural. When you look at how love is communicated and expressed, how respect is, expressed and experienced, it may be culturally based, right? So I wouldn't say that if you're not experiencing those things, that person is not family. I think sometimes you have to really work harder to feel connected to those particular family members when those things are not there. But it doesn't mean they're not family either, right? I think perhaps how much you let them in and open up to them and be vulnerable, or, take in that relationship, of course, will depend on how you're treated. But I'm mindful that it could also suggest that you're writing off people who don't do those things or who don't express things. Yeah, I think the caveat is important. We're hearing a resounding good advice. I can also see how this kind of advice is really helpful for like a coping mechanism, maybe for family members who have been very toxic in your life. And so just remembering that, you can choose the family, but also within that, I don't want anybody to read this advice and think that it minimizes the negative impact that sometimes toxic family relationships can have on you. Those are still very valid and very, very real. But yes, overall, very, very good advice.
Yeah, I think it's like that idea, like if these things are not happening, the respect, the love, you have to set really clear boundaries, but not cut them off, right? Like there's that cutoff that people do. It's like, you're not family anymore because you do these things. And there's also these really clear boundaries that could also mean that you create space from that person. But
yeah, and sometimes that might look like cut off eventually if the person doesn't respect boundaries. But overall, I think we're agreeing this is really, really good advice. Just the background of maybe when people get there, just being mindful of that as well. Okay, so next, advice from the Washington State Department of Natural Resources, a really common source of relationship advice. Advice for dating and mushroom harvesting. Don't ignore the toxic traits just because they're a fun guy to be around. Like fungi. Get it?
I love it. It's good.
Good or bad advice? Woods, what are your thoughts?
I mean, mushrooms are pretty much the only thing I can grow accidentally. So if you're about to suggest I should also rip those out.
You don't eat them?
No, don't worry about that. We don't need anything from my backyard. I think that is excellent advice, actually. Even though the source is unusual, we definitely don't want to trade off fun and enjoyment or entertainment with pretending that somebody's toxic traits don't exist. That's no good. I think it's good advice and adorable.
Good advice and adorable from Woods. Sesson?
I agree. For sure. I think all good things or fun things can come to an end if they're toxic, right? If there's some level of toxicity there. So I think, always keeping in mind that, you don't have to commit to everything let me just say it this way. I think it's great to have fun, but when you see something that is toxic entering your life and potentially has the ability to have influence and cause harm, then you have to make, I think, a wise sort of decision about whether or not that fun is necessary in that way.
Yes.
You can find it somewhere else. Yeah.
Because like mushrooms, it might poison you. No? Does that extend?
No, it's good.
Okay.
I think it's good.
So overall, good advice. Next, we're moving to Instagram. This one just melted my heart. It's a quote from Brendan Fraser, who I don't know if you guys were fans of his way back in the day, The Mummy, Encino Man, all of those things. He had a lot, we can go into these later, but a lot of issues in Hollywood, some abuse, and then he was blackballed. But in the past year or so, he's had a resurgence, and a show called, I believe, The Whale, won some awards at Venice Film Festival, and he's been making the media circuits again, and just a precious human. But here's a quote from Brendan Fraser. Oh gosh, not to skew your good or bad advice. Sometimes I do that. I'm sorry.
Can't do it.
Anyway, here's a quote from Brendan Fraser. As a young man, I prayed for success. Now I just pray to be worthy of it. Kind of advice, but good or bad advice about maybe how to age? Woods, thoughts?
Sorry.
Oh my God, you're crying over Brendan Fraser. I agree. All of it. I completely agree. It's a precious human. I assume that means great advice.
Sure. I guess I feel bad I didn't have an opinion on Mr. Fraser before now. Worthy of success is such an interesting idea. I think you should just maybe be able to feel like you're worthy whether or not you're experiencing success. But I would hate to sort of judge this man's reframe for himself, that it feels like he's giving sort of less advice and more sort of his own perspective. Mm-hmm. And so I'll reserve judgment and just hope that he feels maybe worthy of good things whether or not
he's successful.
Yeah.
I mean, don't we all wish that for Brendan Fraser? Gosh, I agree. So good advice, especially if it works for him. Sesson? Oh my gosh, you're going to say bad advice, aren't you? It's okay if you do.
I'm not. I think I'm having a hard time answering if it's good or bad advice. I think I'm like trying to really think about this idea of being worthy of success, and what that means to be worthy of success. So not
I think kind of
everybody-
what if he gets success, he can carry himself well through the, Hollywood success, type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like this idea, like, do I deserve it? Right? Like, the truth is, not everybody becomes successful through hard work, and
Maybe that's what he was meaning, that he works hard for it. It's such a good idea.
I think there's some people who really, have earned success through hard work, dedication, respect of others, and really put in the time and effort, and other people who inherit it.
Yeah.
And so when I think about like the worthy of success, I think if you worked hard for it, then I think it's just, I think feeling worthy of it should be something that you should feel like. I think anybody who works hard for their success should feel like they're deserving of it. So I hope he does. If he's worked hard, I hope he can really embrace that and really relish in that effort and that time he's dedicated.
Yes, really, really good point. So like if you, including Brendan Fraser, have success, hopefully you can appreciate the success and be able to like revel in it. We gave advice to him and other people. We turned it. Good job, Cessin. Anne was fantastic. All right, last but certainly not least, from Dr. Emily Anhalt. Pop psychology, I hate. No one will love you until you learn to love yourself. Nope. We learn to love ourselves through the love we receive from others, ideally starting with our caregivers. Surround yourself with people who love you while you learn to love yourself. Woods, good or bad advice? I can read it again too.
No, you don't need to. I actually really love that advice because I actually really dislike the advice that I don't think is founded in too much science necessarily, although Cessin may correct me, that you have to love yourself before you can sort of seek out, especially the advice is typically given in the context of like romantic relationships, right? No one's going to love you until you love yourself. First of all, that's not true. It's factually not accurate. Like science aside, scientific facts aside, is just...
Well, yeah. In addition to scientific facts, it's also scientifically not found.
Right. But also the emphasis that you shared as part of this advice about we learn how to love ourselves. We learn our own self-image. We learn self-respect. We learn self-care from ideally starting with our first sort of foundational relationships. That is very accurate scientifically. That's not always sufficient for going on to then have healthy romantic relationships in the future. However, it is necessary for all humans to be able to feel like they can love themselves and like they are valuable and that they have worth, to have other people believe that about them too. It's just sort of a key piece of that process. And I never like the second implied meaning of the advice that this person's countering, which is that you can't learn how to love yourself if you don't already do that. And you just, therefore, would you going to just be ostracized forever? Like, if I don't figure out what's best about me and just feel fully confident, I can't go out into the world. Like, most people are just never like that. And when you,
but also imagine being partnered with somebody who never questions anything and never needs input from the outside or like reinforced like value. Like also, that would be a challenging person to be partnered with.
Right. Well, and when you think about something like, I mean, my brain always goes a little bit more clinical, but when you're thinking about something like depression, for example, that can strongly impact your self-image, your confidence, your motivation. It's cognitively and emotionally enormous weight, and sometimes the only thing that we should be doing for people experiencing that is to love them regardless. We don't wait for them to come out of it and to find their own self-esteem again before we
are willing to love them
and wrap around them.
Yeah, exactly.
So I really like this advice.
Sarah loves it. Exclamation points after it, including her beautiful monologue. Cessin?
I mean, I feel like we'd have to rename the show if we didn't love this. Right?
Oh, okay, good. I was so afraid she was going to come in and correct me. Like, oh, actually.
I think, no, right?
Actually, love is bad.
Bad. I don't know that there's anything to disagree with here. I completely support the notion. I think it's one of those things where I don't know at what point this happened, but like there's a growing movement of people, I think, who do research, who, have a platform, who talk about like love grows from within kind of thing, right? Like there's that toxic, I think it's on some level very toxic to be like, empower yourself to love yourself. Like love starts from within, like all of this, like, and you hear this from some pretty big names. I'm not going to name the names, so but there's some names out there who have really very large followings as well, right? Who on one level do really great, interesting research, but I think some of the larger messages that promote around this idea that you have to sort of, love yourself, that codependent, like there's a lot of issue that I have with this idea that you have to look inward first. Like like you said, Sarah, the literature talks about how you learn to love yourself, and that is through the care and love of others. And of course, there are going to be people who also name sort of some exceptions, right? Like some people who grow up in really, really toxic lives, right? Like with toxic, deprived of affection, of secure attachments, who go on to be phenomenal, loving, securely attached human beings. But that's when you look at their full story, you always find people who care
along the way. You hear about teachers who loved and supported and believed in them. Other community members.
Right. And so, we can always name exceptions in anything too, right? If you're like, I had nobody, literally, I only did it through my own sort of self-exploration, but the rule, right, is always, you find that in caregivers. I mean, there's decades of research to show for it. So it's good in theory, right? Love yourselves because you don't want to have to count on other people to do that work for you. But it's like, that's just not how the human condition works. So
good advice.
Good advice.
All around good advice. For more advice, please check out Patreon page. And as always, thanks for listening to Attached. Remember, call us, email us, or get us on those social medias about relationship advice you've received and that you're wondering whether to follow or pass on. We cannot wait to talk about it.